Bills Mafia. On today's Air Raid Hour pregame, we will be breaking down what we expect to see from the Bills tomorrow night as they take on the Jacksonville Jaguars on Monday Night Football. Injury updates, key matchups, our pregame superlatives, all that are coming up. But first,
Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour pregame show, coming to you a day early, not right before the game like we typically do, just because of that Monday Night Football 7:30 start, part of that doubleheader with the Commanders and the Bengals. This is the Air Raid Hour pregame show. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at the Bills Guys, joined as always by Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money, part of the Cover One Sports Network. And Dave, I don't know about you, but I freaking despise Monday Night Football doubleheaders.
Well, and it's like, remember a couple years ago, or for a couple years, they did the doubleheader Monday Nighter, but they were like, one was like a West Coast game and one was kind of like at 7 or 7:15. So they didn't really overlap a ton.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't know if the NFL wants to compete against itself. I don't get that, but I'm sure the money is still worth it to them to have two games on at the same time in prime time. It is a little weird that it's going to be happening at the same time.
I guess, the way they stagger it as one game is ending, once it's over, the next game sort of kicks in and is sort of finishing, but it's just, they're competing with literally themselves. It's very, very weird. Like you mentioned, the West Coast thing makes total sense to me. And if they wanted to have like a 10 p.m. East Coast start game, right? But it's the game that's on the West Coast really starting at 7, like that makes total sense. But whatever this is, it's just weird.
Yeah.
I don't like it. But the positive is the game starts now at 7:30 as opposed to 8:20. So I get to go to bed a little bit earlier. Some talking points heading into this football game. The Jaguars are 1-7 in their last 8 games. That win came with CJ Beathard at the helm, not Trevor Lawrence. They are 0-2 right now on the season. Their backs will be up against the wall. That can be a dangerous proposition. Expect a hungry team, a team that is more maybe inclined to go for it on 4th down, maybe try more gimmicks, more trick plays, just something to light a spark under that 0-2 football team. So I actually don't like the fact that the Jaguars are 0-2 coming into this.
They'll be desperate. Like you mentioned, they haven't been super aggressive to this point on the season. They've only gone for 1 4th down so far in 2 games. But Doug Peterson, he's going to get creative. His team was expected to compete for that division crown again this year after they had it kind of in the grasp and let it slip away. Last year, as we know, they kind of faltered down the stretch of last season. So obviously the season's not lost for this Jacksonville team. They got a lot of new faces to kind of acclimate, much like the Bills do on the offensive side, but they will have their backs up against the wall. We will get a desperate Jaguars team. And this is a team that has beaten the Bills the last 2 times they've played the Bills. So I never discount the Jaguars. Doesn't matter who's coaching or whatever. This team, just for whatever reason, gives us trouble. And so definitely not discounting them.
Yeah, if you're one of those people who go off vibes, Josh Allen is 3-5 in his career on Monday Night Football, and the Jags consistently seem to have our number, even when they are down bad with a head coach like Urban Meyer. So the vibes are good heading into this game because the Bills are 2-0, but the vibes, they can maybe change quickly, just based on the track record and the voodoo of it all. But we're here to stick to the cold hard facts, none of the vibe stuff. So let's start off with the weather. 60s at kickoff, maybe a little bit of a chance of rain. So some pretty decent weather for Monday Night Football. I'm sure the Jaguars are happy to escape that South Florida heat, having played Miami in South Florida and in Jacksonville the last couple of weeks. And then in terms of injuries, the Jaguars, Tyson Campbell, that's the big one. He's on IR. He's not going to make it to this game. He's their star corner. Evan Ingram is the other big one, big, huge volume part of their offense at tight end. He is out with his injury. Questionable for the Jaguars are Darnell Savage, who is yet to play a game for the Jaguars, and their change of pace power back Tank Bigsby. For the Bills, no Taron Johnson, no Terrel Bernard.
Yeah, and like, look, for the Jags, it may not seem like a big deal on the surface, but them not being without Evan, or them being without Evan Ingram, is a big deal. The Bills gave up a little bit in the middle of the field, obviously, against the Cardinals in week 1. We saw Jonnu Smith, even with the Dolphins, have some success against the Bills in week 2. So missing a guy like Ingram that's a big benefit for the Bills, that the Bills will not have to deal with Ingram. Obviously, we kind of already knew, 99% sure. We were pretty sure that both Taron Johnson and Bernard were going to be out for this game. Still no word on them, whether or not they're going to end up on IR or not. It hasn't happened to this point. You would like to think, since it hasn't happened to this point, that it's not going to happen. They still may end up missing for 3-4 games, but I guess that's the silver lining when looking at those two guys with those injuries. But yeah, both teams have some kind of key injuries here 2 weeks into the season, so both teams playing a little bit undermanned.
Let's talk now a little bit about the matchups, and let's start with the Buffalo Bills offense versus the Jacksonville Jaguars defense. The Buffalo Bills did not run a lot of plays last week, only 46, because the defense, they stepped up. Josh Allen, through 2 weeks, has passed 19 and then 23 times in his 2 starts. Does he get over 25 this week passing attempts?
I will say yes. So, look, this Jacksonville team, if you're going to hang your hat on something sort of 2 games into the season, like, they've been pretty solid against the run, just outside the top 10 in rushing yards per game allowed, ranking wise, in 2024, but they've allowed the 3rd most passing yards per game so far in 2024. So they've got some problems. They also have the most defensive penalties and defensive penalty yards of any team through 2 weeks. So I feel like in my notes, I put this could be the week that the Bills do open it up a little bit with the passing game, just knowing that the Jaguars' strength is that front 4, and they've been pretty stout against the run. The Bills have faced 2 pretty, I'll say, light defensive fronts in the Cardinals and the Dolphins through 2 games. This will be a bigger test for the Bills' ground attack. So I do like Josh Allen airing it out a bit more in this game. It's prime time. I think you'll see, that 30 attempt range, plus or minus. I do expect that the Bills will open up the playbook a little bit more for this game.
Yeah, I mean, you saw the Dolphins have their most success in week 1 using Etienne out of the backfield and then popping those big plays to Hill and Waddle. And then you saw Cleveland last week sort of take using the passing game as an extension of your running game approach. And they just tried to pepper the Jaguars with short to intermediate targets utilizing Deshaun Watson. So I'm in agreement with you. I think we're going to get over 30 pass attempts from Josh Allen this week. And I think this is a really big test for sort of this next iteration of Josh Allen, right? We want to see him be a quarterback who can death by 1,000 paper cuts you, right? Take the underneath stuff, right? Run that short to intermediate offense, not hold on to the ball too long, things like that. I think that the Buffalo Bills might have a little bit of a trouble getting the run game going against, as you mentioned, this stout Jacksonville front. So using the passing game as an extension of the running game is something that will help with that. So I do think, and I'm in agreement with you, that we see over 25 for Josh Allen this week. We just mentioned, right? It's going to be tough maybe getting the ball going on the ground. But as I mentioned previously, Miami was able to weaponize Devon Achane, right? 7 catches for 76 yards in that week 1 matchup. I'm expecting another big all-purpose, keyword there, all-purpose game from James Cook.
Yeah, I mean, it may not be his most efficient game, and I think that's fine. I do think that the Bills should still try to get him those 20 touches, I'll say, right? If it's not 20 rushing attempts, okay, but get him, 20 touches in this game if you can. If the Bills run 50 to 60 plays like we hope they do, even if they run 50 odd plays, which is about average, then give James Cook 20 of those touches and let Josh Allen have the ball in his hand the other 30 times, 30 or more, right? If you get James Cook involved in the passing game. So I am with you on that. We're starting to kind of, one game doesn't make a sample, really two doesn't. When we start to look at the Jags defensively from a DVOA standpoint, 18th overall, 21st against the pass, 15th against the run, coming into this game. So although raw statistics wise, they show well against the run, per DVOA, they're only about middle of the pack. And I think that has to do with the fact that that Cleveland Browns team they played in week 2 with Jerome Ford and Deonta Foreman, really, they weren't super efficient in that game on the ground. So, we'll see what happens here. I liked what I've seen also from Ray Davis in the times that he's gotten the ball. And the one thing I would say too about Ray Davis is if you look at his raw statistics, he doesn't look like he's been super efficient, but he's also come in at the end of some games, notably that Miami game where they were just pounding the rock to try to kill clock, and his yards per carry took a big hit. But when the snaps mattered, 2-3 runs earlier in that game, he looked pretty well. So I like the idea of a little bit of a 1-2 punch in this game.
One interesting storyline heading into this game, 2 former Buffalo Bills will be on the sidelines and on the field for the Jacksonville Jaguars in this game tomorrow night. Mitch Morse, the former Bills starting center, and Gabe Davis, the former Bills number 2 wide receiver. And what's so interesting about this is both of those guys probably are going to be in the defensive meeting rooms this week for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Mitch Morse has a rather intimate knowledge of the Buffalo Bills line calls. Gabriel Davis has a pretty intimate knowledge of the Buffalo Bills route concepts. So what they can share with their teammates, what they can share with the Jaguars coaches, honestly, I think that could, in small part, play a role this week. I mean, we saw last week, maybe not so much with Jordan Poyer and the Miami Dolphins, but the Buffalo Bills had some extra time to prepare this week. And I almost feel like maybe they have to adjust some verbiage, or maybe they have to adjust some like go-tos in certain situations, because they know a guy like Gabriel Davis or a guy like Mitch Morse are going to hint to the defensive coaches, when you see this or in this situation, they're going to do this.
I think Morse is the big one here, right? Yeah, Davis is gonna kind of maybe give some ideas around coverages, but I think Bobby Babich is gonna anticipate that a bit. But Mitch Morse, smart player with the Bills for a long time at the pivot. I think he's gonna be one. He's obviously gonna be the one calling out for the offensive line, the protections, and things of that nature. So this is going to be it's going to be a good test for Bobby Babich, right, and Sean McDermott to try to. And I would say more so for Babich, right? And he's calling the plays, and he's going to have to be a little bit creative, right? We're undermanned at the linebacker position. We're undermanned at slot. We know that they're going to have to be creative with what they do with Williams and Spector. And like, the fact of the matter is like, yes, those guys played well coming downhill last week. You'd like to think that leads maybe to some help for the Bills in the run game. But you mentioned they still have guys like, Christian Kirk roaming the middle of the field. Brenton Strange had a pretty good game last week. We liked him in the pre-draft process. So that middle of the field is still going to be an area where I think the Bills can't take for granted, just because against Miami, they kind of got Miami out of their element last week.
The passing game. Every week, it seems like the consistent is Khalil Shakir. Last week they tried to get Dalton Kincaid involved early. We've seen Knox with a catch or two here, Matt Collins with a big catch or two here, Keon Coleman with a big week 1, and then he didn't catch a pass, or I think he might have even had just one target in week 2.
Yeah, one target. Yeah.
This is the life of a team without Stephon Diggs. It's a true wide receiver by committee. Whose week is it, do you think, this week to step up?
I mean, until someone else does step up, I'm going to have to keep saying Khalil Shakir, right? And I do think that we saw a little bit, right? Amari Cooper last week against this Jaguars team, decent. But they kind of took him out of the game, right? That boundary guy, like Cooper bounced back this week, obviously, but they took Cooper out of the game last week. And so on the boundary, it's a little iffy. And for me, I'm going to be looking at the middle of the field, and I'm going to be looking for Khalil Shakir again, because he's been the guy that stepped up, and Dalton Kincaid as well. But I'm going to have to say it's going to be Shakir until we see otherwise. I keep waiting for that sort of Curtis Samuel breakout, but also the Bills really just haven't opened it up a ton through 2 weeks in the passing game. So for the limited action that we've seen so far out of this passing attack, I'm going to have to say it's going to be Khalil Shakir.
Yeah, Khalil Shakir, I think, is just going to be the one consistent all year long. He's the kind of guy where when Josh Allen maybe is feeling the heat from a Trayvon Walker, feeling the heat from a Josh Allen, feeling the heat from Josh Allen Hines, right? Joshua Allen Hines, feeling the heat from an Arik Armstead. Khalil Shakir is probably the direction that Josh Allen is going to look. If they're looking to beat the Jaguars over the top, as Roy Collins comes in here and says, maybe every MVS makes a big catch or two. I think in terms of like MVS and like having a big game, it's always going to be like he had a big catch or he had two big catches. I don't think we're going to see like MVS ever have a game this season where he pops off for like 8 catches. I just don't think that that's going to be the role that MVS is going to play on this football team. But this is maybe the week where Dalton Kincaid can get more involved in this offense, or even Curtis Samuel. Spoiler alert, not trying to give away too much from my superlatives, but I think maybe a guy like Curtis Samuel could be more involved in the offense, just getting the ball in the hands of these playmakers, because the Buffalo Bills are probably going to be looking to use the passing game as an extension of their run game this week. You already mentioned it a little bit in the run game, but what does the DVOA tell us about this Jacksonville Jaguars defense as a whole?
It tells us that they're 18th overall, 21st against the pass, 15th against the rush. So from a DVOA standpoint, what that tells you versus the raw statistics is that DVOA is not giving Jacksonville as much credit for their run defense through 2 games as the advanced analytics would tell you, meaning that they've gone against a team like the Browns, who had traditionally been a pretty good run team, but with Jerome Ford and Dante Foreman, DVOA knocked them down a bit for that. And then in week 1 against the Dolphins, you saw Mostert get banged up, right? And so, yes, Etienne had himself a game. A lot of that was through the passing game. So, DVOA statistically saying the Jags rush D maybe isn't quite as good as it would lead you to believe raw statistic wise. And then conversely, while their pass D is ranked 21st DVOA and they're third to last in yards per game in raw statistics, it's DVOA is telling you that they are a slightly better pass defense team than the raw statistics would lead you to believe, but still a bottom 10 to 12 team through 2 weeks in the season, but getting a little bit of a credit there for going against, a Miami team that with Tua had a pretty potent passing attack. And then obviously last week with the Browns, there was essentially no real passing attack to speak of. So probably rightfully so, right in that range in the low 20s for them through 2 games.
All right. Transitioning now to the Buffalo Bills defense versus the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. The Bills defense this year has been very much a next man up approach, and that continues with Terrel Bernard out this week. Balon Spector slots into his spot. Dorian Williams continues at weak side linebacker in place of Milano. Cam Lewis in for Taron Johnson again at nickel corner. And then obviously Jamarcus Ingram filling in now that dime backer role. Can the Buffalo Bills keep this up?
I do think they can, right? And the reason I say that is because they have gone through, like they went through it last year early in the season, losing Milano, losing Daquan Jones, losing Trey White. They have sort of like probably mentally gone and prepared for this already based on what they had to go through last season, right? So I do think that also knowing that the game they played against Jacksonville in London last year was the game where 2 of those major injuries happened, Daquan Jones and Matt Milano, there is going to be a little bit, I think, of added oomph for the Bills defense this week to kind of say, hey, like, we're not going to let Travis Etienne run all over us like he did in London. Calvin Ridley's not in the building anymore in Jacksonville. He tore the Bills up in London. Entered Gabe Davis. The Bills aren't going to want to let a former player of theirs torch them in prime time. So I do think the Bills defense will be up to the task. The biggest thing right now for the Bills is it's got to be focusing on third down. The Jags right now through 2 games on offense, 26.3% third down conversion rate, 5th worst in the NFL so far this year. So to me, the key for the Bills is don't let the Jags convert on third downs. The Bills themselves really haven't been great defensively on third down this year, allowing 50%, which is one of the worst in the league. So to me, the third down defense becomes the story of this game. And we've seen weird things happen in the Bills in past games. These teams make plays that just seem to only happen against the Bills on long third down. So to me, priority number one, third down defense, get off the field when you have a chance and slow down Travis Etienne on early downs, who's only averaging 3.8 yards per carry so far on this season. So that to me is priority number one.
Yeah, and you mentioned that third down situation. Evan Ingram being out, that helps a ton because he seems like he would be a go-to guy for them on third down. That doesn't mean the Jaguars don't have weapons, though, right? They have Christian Kirk in the slot. They obviously have Gabriel Davis, Brian Thomas Jr. on the outside. They have some nice auxiliary weapons in Parker Washington, Devin Duvernay. And then, as you mentioned, Etienne out of the backfield, he is dangerous, both as a runner and as a pass catcher.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the Jaguars, with, some time to game plan for the Buffalo Bills, being this, having sort of a week to game plan for this Buffalo Bills here, it seems to me, if you were going to attack this Bills defense, you're going to want to attack their communication.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to have a new inside linebacker in Bale Inspector. Cam Lewis is going into week 3. Some new safeties back there, right? At least new safeties from last season. You're going to want to attack the communication of this Buffalo Bills defense. I think you're going to see a lot of stuff trying to get them to go side to side, using guys like Etienne in that fashion, Christian Kirk in that fashion. It would make sense to me that they might try to go hurry up, try to go quick, try to pass the ball a lot out of those things, and just try to test the Bills' communication, a lot of window dressing, pre-snap motion, etc. Just things to make the Bills have to work and communicate.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it was a good test in a way for the Bills last week with Spector and Williams. They obviously showed good chemistry together, but this is a different animal now this week. I mean, it is also good that it was a primetime game that they came into. We saw that very first play Spector came in and he kind of lost where he was supposed to be communication wise, right? He was supposed to go out to the flat and take care of Etienne, and that didn't happen. So I think as the game went on, though, the fact that injury happened to Bernard so early in the game made, at least for this week, be a blessing in disguise. The fact that he got all those reps, and yeah, those guys are going to have to be super tight with their communication. And yeah, guys like Kirk, even Gabe Davis, a little bit over the Brenton Strange I mentioned, they can still hurt you over the middle. And the guy that kind of worries me, and you mentioned it, is Etienne out of the backfield. That's the thing that worries me. Him in space, with that misdirection, he can do some of the things. He's not as explosive as Etienne, but he can do some of the things out of the backfield wise that the Dolphins did with Etienne once he gets the ball in his hands. So you're right. That communication has to be tight.
And it hasn't been all that successful, but Devin Duvernay has a carry in each of the first 2 games this season. So getting Devin Duvernay involved, getting Etienne involved, just going east-west, trying to, utilizing screens, misdirection, stuff like that. Just trying to test that communication. So hopefully the Buffalo Bills can prevent those big explosive plays from the Jaguars. On the ground, it really seemed like the Jaguars wanted to focus on a more balanced approach in week 1. You had 12 carries for Etienne. You had 12 carries for Bigsby, but then Bigsby got hurt. Kind of saw the Jaguars go away from that in week 2. They've averaged 22 designed runs per game, a 25-19 split through the first 2 games. They have Etienne. They might have Tank Bigsby. Wouldn't be shocked if maybe they took notes from the Cardinals and the Dolphins and try to sort of matriculate the ball down the field on the ground, especially when they have a guy like Etienne who, even though you're trying to matriculate the ball down the field, he can create explosives at the second level, even off of a traditional style play.
Yeah, so maybe we get right into the DVOA then here. 11th overall for the Jags on offense, which you wouldn't think based on the fact that they're 0-2. 11th in passing, 17th in rushing. So it's a little bit of an odd ranking for the Jags when you think about what they are as a team so far through 2 games, being 0-2. So the reason, right, that they are where they are is because they did jump out to that 14-0 lead against the Miami Dolphins. They did have that efficient running game working with Tank Bigsby in week 1. We saw Trevor Lawrence make a nice throw to Brian Thomas Jr. in the back of the end zone in that game. And the Cleveland Browns are a very good defense that they played in week 2. And The Jags, although they lost that game, they were in the game, and they did make some plays down the field. Brenton Strange with Gabe Davis, who's had his typical high yards per catch average through 2 weeks. So look, the Jags, I mean, they can try to work the ball down the field raw statistically, right? They are not what the DVOA says they are. They are bottom 10 passing team. They're both behind the Bills as well there. So the DVOA is being a little bit kinder to them on the offensive side of the ball than the raw statistics would show you based on the two teams they played,
Mhm.
notably Cleveland in week 2 being that really good defense.
Yeah, and this is a week where, Babbage and McDermott, I think you're going to see a lot of cloud coverages from them. They're going to give up that underneath stuff, but they just don't want Christian Kirk to beat them deep over the top. They don't want Brian Thomas Jr. to beat them deep over the top. They don't want Travis Etienne, excuse me, to break that big explosive. Like, they're going to do everything they can to keep the defense or the offense in front of them, right? Make them earn it in the red zone. I think
Yep.
that's going to be, once again, the philosophy for the Buffalo Bills. That goal line then becomes the back of the end zone, excuse me, then becomes your cloud coverage. And you rely on forcing field goals, forcing turnovers, and trusting your offense to outscore a team when you flip the field once or twice with the turnover and you force them to field goals. That, to me, seems like it's going to be the Bills' strategy throughout the year. And I think it's a strategy that can be successful, but it's only successful if they shut teams down in the red zone.
Yeah. I mean, and the Jags are only one of, I think it's 8 teams who don't have an interception this year. So they haven't been great at sort of the turnover differential. So if you can shut this team down in the red zone and be efficient yourselves on offense, you've got a really good chance to win this game. And like we mentioned before, one of the worst teams in the league so far in third down. So holding the field goal attempts, worst case, if they do cross over to your side of the field and they do go for it on a few fourth downs, put them in situations where it's like fourth and longs, right? Where they're really going to have to think twice about going for it and making sure that they, potentially have to take the points because they've only gone for 1 4th down so far this year. And I do expect that to change. I think you will see them go for maybe a couple in this game.
Something we haven't really talked about the first 2 weeks, I think we got to address it this week, is special teams. Last week, we thought Tyler Bass's kick was likely tipped at the end of the game. It was not. He just straight up shanked it. And then the Buffalo Bills went out and worked out 2 kickers this week. Didn't sign anybody, but they worked out 2 kickers. So to me, I think special teams and maybe starting to lack faith in Tyler Bass a little bit could impact the aggressiveness of the Buffalo Bills on 4th down past the 50-yard line.
Yeah, it could. And I mean, the thing was, he was kind of cruising along, right? Until that kick at the end. And you wonder, it's like, was he just mentally a little bit out of it? Because at the end of the day, that kick really didn't matter in the outcome of the game. But like, that's not what you want to say, right? As an excuse. You want that guy to be acting like every kick is important, right? And every kick really does matter, because the last thing you want is to leave the field and the last sort of memory or play you had as a kicker is a kick that you totally yanked and pulled. So I think it'll depend on kind of how the game's going. I think if the Bills are, feeling it a bit on offense, moving the ball well, maybe, they get stopped or something for a 4th down, 3 or 4, I think you will see them go for it if they're on the other side of the 50.
All right. It is that time, ladies and gentlemen, for our pre-game superlatives. We are going to kick things off, as always, with our Take Me Higher player of the game. So, Dave, before we get into it, who is your Take Me Higher player of the game?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of entered this territory now. I think it's Khalil Shakir. I mean, I mentioned him. We talk about who's going to be the go-to guy. I think Khalil Shakir is he's not a wild card level player anymore. And I think at this point, he's sort of elevated himself to Take Me Higher status as being the go-to wide receiver on this team through 2 weeks. And now that may sort of change as the season evolves. But through 2 weeks, he has been the go-to guy on 3rd down. He has been the one making the clutch catches, sure-handed catches, and moving those chains. And I think the Bills want to start fast in this game and kind of really take it to the Jags and really kind of avenge maybe some of the past couple games that they've struggled against this team. Khalil Shakir is going to be the guy that does that for the Bills. Hard to go against James Cook, but I do think he will have a slightly more inefficient game than he's had the first two. So I will go with Khalil Shakir.
It's funny you mentioned James Cook there because for the third week in a row, I'm not changing a single thing on my note sheet. I have not touched this. Now going on 3 consecutive weeks, a word for word in my note sheet is the same. My take me higher player of the game this week is James Cook, predicting 150 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. And once again, this is more of a commentary on the Buffalo Bills offensive line, how they've been getting it done up front, running a lot of those, tackle darts and some of that those Toledo concepts and all those different things, getting those tackles out in space, getting them on linebackers, getting them on safeties, creating these runs and balancing this offense, because that has sort of been the talking point of the NFL over the last 2 weeks. And you saw Mel Kiper have sort of just an absolute temper tantrum on air on ESPN this week about all the cloud coverage and the cover 2 that you're seeing in the National Football League. So how do you get teams out of cloud coverage? How do you beat teams? You run the dang ball, right? You take the easy stuff underneath, and then you become efficient in the red zone. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, you got to take the underneath stuff. You got to pound the rock successfully. You got to be efficient in the red zone. I can't imagine a world where they're going to be able to get up and over the top of this defense too much, but the Jacksonville Jaguars always try some different things. So it might be interesting to see some of the different things that Ryan Nielsen might have cooked up, but I'm going to go with James Cook as my take me higher player of the game once again.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, right? Because the Jags are, really down near the bottom of the NFL in yards per game allowed, or in yards per game passing, but they're 14.7 yards per catch is the third best in the NFL. So they're doing it with like shots, but it's not with efficiency. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. James Cook, I mean, you got to keep going with him until you ride the hot hand, right?
Next up is our wild card player of the game. All right, Dave, who is the player who's going to surprise us this week and help contribute to a Buffalo Bills victory?
Yeah, this is a good one. This is a true wild card because guy hasn't played for the Bills yet, and I'm assuming he's going to be active for this game. Dwayne Smoot, anyone? Revenge game?
Revenge game.
Look, I mean, spelling Greg, spelling AJ, font, like Dwayne Smoot's going to have something to say. He's been effective when he's been healthy in his career. I think maybe Dwayne Smoot going against Trevor Lawrence in practice for the past couple years is an advantage for the Bills in that rotation. And maybe he makes a big play, gets a sack in this game. He's not going to necessarily have a monster box score. He might not even be active. Who knows? But I'll say for now, let's give Dwayne Smoot the essence of the wild card player for this one.
Just want to get Pete Nanas coming in here because he had one from our Take Me Higher. He said Vaughn schooling some OTs that are struggling. Yeah, obviously Rousseau, Von Miller being able to create some pressure on Trevor Lawrence, maybe being able to force some turnovers and flip the field for the Buffalo Bills offense. Things like that could be key, obviously. So you need your 2 top tier edge rushers to step up week in and week out. My wild card player of the game is Curtis Samuel. Yeah. I think that maybe after 3 weeks, maybe that turf toe is healing a little bit. Maybe see him a little bit, not just as a wide receiver, but maybe see Curtis Samuel in the backfield a little bit this week as a running back. Get him out, get him in space. Maybe he has a chunk play or 2 for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one where you could almost say keep saying his name in the wild card till it happens.
All right. Up next is our Respect You player of the game. So, Dave, who do you got? Who is a player from the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Buffalo Bills they got to be paying attention to this week?
For me, this is maybe a bit chalky, but I'm going to say Travis Etienne. I think the fact that he just really kind of ran over the Bills in London last year, had maybe his best game of the season last year against the Bills. And, he's a guy that you don't necessarily think of as a tackle breaking machine, but against the Bills last year, he broke so many tackles. And once he gets going, whether it's out of the backfield or downhill, he's a guy that you do have to worry about and respect. Now, I will say the Bills have had their hands full, right, through 2 weeks, going against James Conner, going against Devon Achane, two really good backs in their own right. Etienne kind of brings the best of both of those guys to the table in this one. You have to respect him. If the Jags really want to stay in this game, they're going to have to be in short down and distances, convert on third downs. Etienne's going to be key to that. So I will say Travis Etienne is my respect you player.
Yeah, Etienne was on my list, and then I was like, well, if Dave goes Etienne, I'm just going to go Joshua Allen Hines. That makes total sense. Josh Hines, Trayvon Walker, Arik Armstead. I think those guys are a given. Obviously, if they can pressure Josh Allen, they can affect things like third down. They can affect things like forcing turnovers. And the next thing you know, all of a sudden, it's a close ball game, or Jacksonville has a very distinct advantage. But I'm going to go a little bit out. I don't want to say going out of left field here, but I'm going to pass on the obvious choice of the pass rushers, and I'm going to go with the linebacker duo that they have there in Jacksonville. I'm going to go with Foye Oloquan, and I'm going to go with Devin Lloyd, the two linebackers that they have. I think these are the best linebackers the Bills have faced thus far this season. I think they are the best in terms of sideline to sideline, the best in terms of stuffing the run, the best in terms of dropping back into coverage. If there are two linebackers that could give Josh Allen fits, something he hasn't seen the previous 2 weeks against this Cardinals defense or this Dolphins defense, I think this is the one thing he hasn't seen, is these two athletically gifted linebackers who can do a lot of things and can give you a lot of options defensively. So I'm going to go with the two linebackers, Oloquan and Devin Lloyd. Devin Lloyd being one of the personal favorites of this podcast.
One. I like that.
We also liked Chad Muma back in the day, who they have for their three linebacker sets as well.
Like big Chad Muma guy.
All right, on to now our hot takes. As you know, this is a network of substance. We're not really the hot take artists out there on the internet. There are other places you can go to get that hot takery, but every once in a while we like to dabble in the hot takes. Dave, what is your hot take this week?
Trevor Lawrence has been sacked 7 times through 2 games. We saw some really good defensive performances today throughout the NFL, sack artist wise. Denver sacked Baker Mayfield a ton. There were a few other games. This year's NFL has really been a lot about running the ball and defense. And as I say that, the things will open up, I'm sure, as we move along. But through a couple games here, it's been a lot about running the ball and defense. I'm going to say the Bills get 5 sacks on Trevor Lawrence in this game. They get a lead, put Jacksonville in some pretty tough down and distances in this game, force them into a game script where there's a lot of passing. And I do think the Bills' defensive line, with a resurgent Von Miller and a Dwayne Smoot revenge game, 5 sacks for the Bills' defense in this game against the Jaguars.
Roy Collins comes in and says Ed Oliver gets 2 of those sacks. My hot take is going to involve Josh Allen. I think he goes over 35 passing attempts this week, but under 300 yards. I think this is a death by 1,000 paper cuts type of week. I think the narrative after this football game is, hey, Josh Allen is really learning to do things in different ways, much in the way Patrick Mahomes learned to do things in different ways, which ultimately ended up leading to the Kansas City Chiefs being able to go on those runs and win 2 titles when people thought there might have been a little bit of a talent shortage and a rebuilding year a couple of years ago when they won it the first time. So I think Josh Allen, this next iteration of Josh Allen, he's going to be able to beat you in different ways. And I think this is the week that he shows you he can take the underneath stuff. He can be patient. He can do sort of that Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, death by 1,000 paper cuts style of play. So that is my hot take for this football game.
Love it.
On to now our game predictions. We're going to take you back to the future. Dave, paint a picture for us. How is this game going to look?
Well, I think the Bills will get out to a really efficient start on offense in this one. I think that there is a bad taste in their mouth from the last couple times that they've played the Jaguars. I think they are not going to look at the records in this and see that Jacksonville's 0-2 and that they're 2-0. I think they're going to come into this game 11 days from their last game, rested. Jacksonville got beat up in their last game against Cleveland. They will be desperate, but I do think that also means that it will lead to some mistakes for Jacksonville. Sacks, as I mentioned, for the Bills defense, maybe a turnover or two. And the Bills end up winning this game by double digits. I think you see a lot of Ray Davis in the fourth quarter. Maybe you see a little Ray Davis as the closer in this game. And I like your prediction about Josh Allen over 30 attempts, maybe under 300 yards. I think that's going to maybe be what ultimately seals this one for the Bills late in this game. And it ends up being hopefully a fairly comfortable fourth quarter. The Bills take this one 27-13.
Yeah, the Jags always seem to have our number, and I think that Sean McDermott's going to have plenty of material to sort of preach to his football team this week. Hey, they beat us with Urban Meyer. We can't talk, guys. Like, hey, they had our number in London last year. They showed up prepared, and we didn't. Hey, they're 0-2. This is going to be a hungry football team. Their backs are against the wall. You better make sure you're ready to match that intensity. This team is not going to roll over and die. There's a lot of sort of narratives that Sean McDermott has to throw at the locker room this week. But the combination of the Jags always seem to have the Bills number. Allen always seeming to struggle on Monday Night Football, 3-5 career record. The vibes aren't good. So I'm gonna go 27-17 Bills. I think it's interesting early. I think there's a lot of people on Twitter having panic attacks early, but
Will
I
you
think
be one of those people?
Probably. And I think it'll be the Buffalo Bills then pulling away late. Roy Collins comes in with a similar prediction. He says 27-16 Bills. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. If you missed any of it, you can catch it on demand anytime before kickoff tomorrow night. If you know anyone else who you think would enjoy this Cover One pregame, the number one way that we appreciate growing our audience here is, number one, smash that like button, helps us with the algorithm. And number two, just click that share button, copy the link, email it, text it to a friend. We really appreciate it if you think that they would enjoy what we got going on here at the Air Raid Hour. Don't forget, Cover One Roundup will still be live tomorrow before the game, so they get a little at bat at the pregame lifestyle with Uber and Dave. And then don't forget, the Cover One post game show is live tomorrow night following the game. And then, well, what are we going to do? Monday night's normally our time slot. You can catch me tomorrow after the Cover One Buffalo post game show with a special post game show. One of the luxuries of me living out here in the West Coast is it'll only be like 9:30 when the game ends for me. So I will, or when the Greg and Aaron's thing ends for me. So I will be able to give you guys some coverage into the late nights. And then Dave, you will be joining on Tuesday, Joe DeRosa on Disguise coverage to talk about everything that happened on Monday night. Under review.
Yes. I'm looking forward to going on Joe's show on Tuesday. It's going to be interesting, right? Because we're going to have a little bit of a recap, obviously, of the Jacksonville. And then I think he's trying to also get someone from the Ravens content creator community to come on to do a little quick look ahead to Baltimore, since Joe's show will, his next show will not be until after the Ravens game from there. So it should be fun.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy Sunday Night Football. Enjoy your anxiety-fueled Monday as you count down the hours. And hey, be thankful, right? Because of this doubleheader that we all despise, we get an hour earlier kickoff. So we got one less hour.
And be thankful. There were some comments in the comment section. You know what? It's okay to not feel bad for Miami getting absolutely smacked around by Seattle today, down to Tim Boyle as their third quarterback. They deserve it. Enjoy that loss for Miami as well.
We got Robert Wilson coming and saying, why are Bills podcasters so negative about this team, or how good the boys play? The Bills TV broadcasters and podcasts are so pessimistic about the Bills. Josh carried this team for 7 years.
Were we pessimistic? I predicted them to win by 2 touchdowns tomorrow. I don't know if that's pessimistic or not.
I got the little creeping thought in the back of my head about how the Jaguars have beaten us the last couple of weeks, but I'm really confident in this Buffalo Bills football team, the new iteration of this Buffalo Bills football team, and I'm excited to see, because it finally appears like the Buffalo Bills are ahead of the trend, right, offensively, in terms of having that balanced attack and being able to beat these two deep shells, this cloud coverage and things like that. So exciting times ahead for the Buffalo Bills, and we wish them all the best tomorrow night, and hopefully I will be doing a victory post game show, and you'll be enjoying a victory Tuesday with Joe. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!